Discover the shocking truth about the 25 incredible transformations of Genghis Khan's victims. Sarah Thompson's heart raced as she pried open the rusty trapdoor to her grandfather's attic. Dust particles danced in the streaks of sunlight that filtered through grimy windows, illuminating remnants of a life once lived. With each stifled breath, she felt the weight of history pressing against her chest, a palpable reminder of her lifelong passion for the past. She wasn't just looking for relics to reminisce, she was searching for something deeper. Little did she know the hand-drawn ledger she would soon unearth would unravel her sense of self. As her eyes skimmed the faded ink, a chill crept through her bones. Names leaped from the pages, lives transformed under the brutal reign of Genghis Khan. Here were tales of men and women who either succumbed to despair or emerged as unexpected leaders, their struggles reflecting her own family's hardships. Images of her father's weary face, worn by years of providing amid economic adversity, bubbled to the surface. The notion of these victims confronting their fate stirred a long-ignored part of her, a part that had felt frozen after her retirement from teaching, adrift in uncertain waters. How could she engage with these stories without revealing her growing concern that her lineage might be intertwined with the very oppressors she admired these victims for resisting? Each narrative seemed to ask her questions shrouded in moral ambiguity. What if her ancestors had once participated in the very brutality she now lamented? Did those who fought alongside Genghis Khan share a piece of her blood? The moral dilemma clawed at her, twisting within her mind like a vine choking a tree. She hesitated to embrace the echoes of her findings, fearing they might drown her in guilt rather than elevate her mission. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Determined to share her discoveries with others, Sarah reached out to colleagues she once respected, only to feel the sting of ridicule. Their laughs echoed in her mind, making her doubt the value of her research. Were these stories just figments of fantasy, glittering with the false allure of redemption? Her words, once a powerful tool, now hung heavy with scorn. An aching desperation clawed at her heart. Why did she care so deeply about the lessons of those long gone? Why was she even trying to connect history to the injustices of today when she felt so distant from both? Then, an unexpected invitation to present at a local conference landed in her inbox, igniting a flicker of hope. This might be her chance to stake a claim, to fight back against the shadows of her self-doubt. A fire ignited deep within her as she envisioned arguing that history's lessons resonate today more than ever. But uncertainty loomed. Could she truly confront the complexities of her family's past alongside the struggles of those still silenced? Her stomach knotted at the potential fallout. Yet, something urged her forward, an internal call for truth, no matter how painful. However, just as she prepared to step into that spotlight, the weight of a new revelation crashed upon her, a great-grandparent who lived and suffered under Genghis Khan's regime. The revelation spun her world, forcing her to wrestle with her identity even more intensely. Was she preparing to champion the forgotten victims when her own bloodline might have played a role in their suffering? Anguish turned to betrayal, love morphed into self-loathing, and she questioned the very fabric of her existence. How could she advocate for those who had faced brutality when a part of her own history might haunt her stance? She stood at a harrowing crossroads, the ledger open before her, a world of uncertainty teeming with questions. Would she risk her comfort to uncover the truth, battling the duality of her heritage? Or would she let these revelations carve shadows of doubt across her purpose, leaving her in perpetual conflict? The tension thickened as she confronted the dissonance within her. The stakes were higher than ever, and she felt the whispers of the past closing in, urging her to choose decisively before the weight of her own discovery brought her down. The day of the conference arrived, heavy with trepidation. The air was thick with anticipation, drawing out Sarah's nerves and coaxing out her thoughts in a frenzied dance. She stood backstage, the hum of the audience a distant roar that grew louder with every passing moment. The anticipation swelled within her, a familiar anxiety threatening to unravel the resolve she had cobbled together over the past few days. Each face she recognized in the crowd felt like a reminder of the influence they had in her academic life. Their laughter still echoed in her memory. But today was different. Today, she was confronting the shadows of history, her own lineage tangled in a web of moral complexity. Would they see the value in her narrative? Or would they dismiss her once again, willfully blind to the truths she was beginning to uncover? As she moved towards the stage, a swell of determination coursed through her. This was her chance to transcend the doubts that had burdened her since retirement. She had planned her presentation meticulously, infusing it with personal anecdotes interwoven with the historic threads of struggle and metamorphosis. The faces of those who had suffered under Genghis Khan's regime flashed in her mind, fuel for her passion, but just before she stepped into the spotlight, a flash of her great-grandparent's life flickered through her thoughts. Never a victim but perhaps part of the mechanism that perpetuated suffering. Could she ever justify standing before an audience, urging them to empathize with those her bloodline may have wronged? That thought momentarily froze her on the brink of the stage. Yet, there was another voice, insistent and clear, rising above the cacophony of doubt. It urged her to confront her fears, to reclaim her narrative by weaving her lineage into a broader tapestry of history, one that honored both the oppressor and the oppressed. Taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the stage. The glaring lights felt like a spotlight not of judgment, but of clarity. She began, her voice steady yet passionate, recounting the stories she had found, the twists of fate that transformed mere names into vivid realities. With each word, she felt herself shedding the weight of those doubts, pushing against the boundaries of her fears, reclaiming her voice. But as she delved into her great-grandparent's story, the reality hit her. How could she advocate for victims if she had origins steeped in complicity? Each sentence she uttered was both an invitation and a challenge, her heart racing as she laid bare the complexities of moral responsibility. The audience listened intently, some rapt, others shifting in their seats, illustrating their discomfort. But she pressed on. This was not just about her story, it was a revelation about the human condition, the capacity for both healing and harm, for complicity and atonement. As the conclusion hovered, she felt the weight of her journey shift again. Perhaps it was not the burden of guilt she should embrace, but the liberating call to confront her history head-on. To learn from it, to transform her lineage's narrative from shame to a robust dialogue about humanity's shared past. With her heart racing, she asked the audience directly, how can we move forward if we ignore the pains of the past? Their reactions varied, some visibly troubled while others nodded in agreement. A silence descended as her words echoed around the room, but within that stillness, she sensed a seed of change take root. Stepping off the stage, adrenaline coursing through her body, Sarah felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and uncertainty. How had she transformed her doubt into a dialogue on legacy? The day had shifted something inside her, unveiling layers she hadn't realized she needed to confront. With renewed purpose, she resolved to explore the implications of her lineage further, to find ways her past could contribute to future understanding and healing. The lingering question remained, what boundaries would she push next to invoke this conversation in a world resistant to facing its past? What risks would she take to explore the depths of her heritage? The hallway closed in around her, and just beyond, she heard the murmurs of an approaching discussion among her peers, words of admiration mingled with skepticism. Steeling herself, Sarah turned, ready to dive into a conversation that held more weight than she could have anticipated. In that moment, she realized it wasn't just about her, this was about a collective reckoning, beginning with her. As she approached the gathering, a thought ignited within her. The only way to dismantle ignorance was to delve deeper into her family's history, understanding its broader implications fully. What new truths awaited in her research, and how would they shape not just her identity but also her voice in the conversations to come? The murmurs reflected the tension in the air, a palpable mix of admiration and skepticism that swirled around Sarah as she stepped into the thrumming arena of discourse. She fought against the instinct to retreat, realizing that it was precisely this moment, this collision of perspectives, that could define her next steps. Her voice had resonated on stage, but now she had to confront the feedback she would receive. Would the conversations here affirm her journey, or would they challenge her resolve in a way she hadn't anticipated? People were forming small clusters, engaged in discussions about her presentation, dissecting her words with the precision of academic scrutiny. Paying keen attention to her surroundings, Sarah felt a flicker of anxiety rise within her. Would they just focus on her lineage's complicity, or would they appreciate the narrative she was trying to forge, the one that blended the stories of the oppressed and the oppressors into a broader, more complex dialogue? Glancing toward a familiar face, she caught the eye of her former mentor, a formidable figure in the field. His brow was furrowed, parsed lips sealed tightly. Would he dismiss her findings, knowing her heritage? Swallowing hard, she steeled herself for whatever was to come. Quite the performance, wasn't he it? He remarked as she approached, his tone gruff yet laced with curiosity. But I worry you may have opened a Pandora's box. How do you plan to manage the fallout from your revelations? His question struck deep, unearthing fears she had tucked away moments ago. Fallout? The very notion of her history sparking dissent both intrigued and terrified her. Beyond her individual journey, the notion of grappling with historical implications left her feeling exposed. I believe confronting the unvarnished truth is essential to forging real understanding, she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. But at what cost, Sarah? You're untangling narratives that can land heavy. Have you thought about the consequences? His skepticism made her pulse quicken. She had, of course, contemplated the risks. The ground beneath her former accomplishments felt less stable, as if she had suddenly stepped onto a precipice without assurance that there was solid ground available. Yet within that uncertainty, a new determination began to take root. Taking a deep breath, she pivoted on her heel, moving deeper into the crowd, determined to engage others. Her former mentor's concerns echoed within her mind, but so did her own voice. She had a platform now, a newfound power to amplify the often silenced voices of history, and she wasn't going to squander that chance by retreating into hesitation. As the discussions swirled around her, she began conversing more widely, careful not to shy away when topics turned contentious. Each conversation held the potential to sharpen her arguments, clarify her thoughts, and ultimately, solidify her purpose. She was learning that ambivalence wasn't a weakness, it was an integral aspect of the narrative she was trying to unfold, designed to foster growth and open dialogue. But then, a sharp voice cut through the mellifluous exchanges, slicing the air like a blade. You talk about healing, but how do we know you're not just reshaping a narrative to fit your own bias? The question came from an audience member, a younger scholar with a piercing gaze, the very embodiment of doubt. Sarah felt the heat rise in her cheeks, a rush of adrenaline propelling her. This was the moment, she realized, to challenge the skepticism with which she had grappled. I encourage such skepticism, she asserted, her voice rising to meet the challenge. It compels us to reflect and ensures we hold each other accountable in our pursuit of understanding. My lineage doesn't grant me immunity from critique. It teaches me to approach history with both humility and intensity. The scholar regarded her with a mix of surprise and mild admiration, as though she had taken an unexpected turn in the argument. But what could she do with such attention? Was she planting the seeds for constructive dialogue, or merely stirring a pot that could boil over? Her mind raced, caught between the fear of condemnation and the exhilaration of intellectual challenge. She realized that the conversations ahead would demand not only her insights but a willingness to explore the uncomfortable truths of humanity's past. With every interaction, she felt the dawning sense of her own agency burgeoning within. Perhaps the confrontation with the truths of her lineage could serve as a pathway to communal healing. Bolstered by this revelation, Sarah faced the crowd as a new idea crystallized. She could leverage the expertise of fellow scholars to navigate these churning waters. What discussions would emerge if she enlisted others in her exploration? As the conversation continued, Sarah resolved to propose a collaborative project, an inquiry into the lives of Genghis Khan's victims, their stories conspiring against historical oblivion. The thought sent a thrill through her, a sign that she was indeed ready to push toward new horizons, even if it meant confronting the resistance that lay ahead. What complexities would unfold as she sought allies in her quest? The outlines of her next journey hung tantalizingly close, waiting to be broken open like the very box she feared. The buzz of conversation swirled around her, thick with anticipation, yet Sarah's thoughts refracted inward. The prospect of collaboration ignited both excitement and trepidation within her. She lingered just outside the circle of discourse, her gaze flickering from one small group to another, her mind racing with potential partnerships and the narratives that could form. Every scholar she regarded had something distinct to bring, but they also harbored opinions, convictions, and biases that could either bolster or derail her vision. As she took a moment to collect herself, she replayed her bold proposal in her mind. The thought of unearthing the stories of Genghis Khan's victims felt monumental and daunting, but she understood all too well the weight of storytelling. She recognized that history isn't just written with facts, it's woven with voices, emotions, and consequences. The possibility of inviting others to engage in this examination stirred an internal tension. Was she ready to open herself to criticism and the risk of conflicting viewpoints? With each deep breath, Sarah squashed the flutter of self-doubt, steeling herself to advance. Her gaze caught the sharp-eyed scholar who had challenged her earlier, the spark of doubt in her eyes lingered even as her words had momentarily shifted. Sarah felt an unexpected urge to engage. Perhaps she could convert that skepticism into something productive, even illuminating. "Excuse me," Sarah approached the group where the younger scholar stood, heart pounding in her chest. "I appreciated your question earlier about narrative bias. I think it reflects a larger concern we should address together." The younger scholar turned, her expression unreadable but curious. "You mean you want to tackle the question of bias as a collective?" "Exactly," Sarah replied, buoyed by her own commitment to this exploration. "I'm considering a collaborative project focusing on the hidden stories of Genghis Khan's victims. I would love your insights and those of others in this room. We have the chance to create a nuanced dialogue around these historical narratives, one that confronts our biases instead of skirting them." A ripple of murmurs passed through the circle. Ideas began to unfurl like tendrils of a vine. What did it mean to revisit these historical narratives? What shadows would they bring to light? The younger scholar leaned forward, intrigued. "If we are to examine the victims' experiences, we must acknowledge our positions too. What authority do we have to speak on behalf of those who suffered?" A chorus of voices chimed in, some echoing the younger scholar's concerns while others suggested methodologies that might empower those silenced in history. As they debated, Sarah felt a newfound clarity cut through the smog of uncertainty. This wasn't simply about her narrative. It was a shared journey into a deeper understanding of humanity's complex past. Their conversation veered through various tangents: ethical storytelling, contextualizing historical injustices, and the stakes of academic integrity. Each idea volleyed back and forth, adding depth and texture to her original vision. Sarah absorbed it all, ready to explore her thoughts on collaboration further, yet beneath the dialogue surged an undercurrent of tension. Not all were convinced of the project's merit, and some seemed protective of their specific academic narratives, territories they were unwilling to relinquish. Sarah sensed the friction, knotted in her stomach. Would this alliance further her objectives, or would it fracture into competing agendas? The prospect of resistance made her pulse race. The commitment to her purpose was growing stronger, yet the path ahead was fraught with potential conflicts that could threaten her vision. "Let us establish common ground," Sarah encouraged, determined to forge ahead despite the distractions of doubt. "If we can agree on a set of guiding principles for this project, I believe it will ground us through our discussions." As they began brainstorming, grappling with principles such as transparency, respect, and shared responsibility, Sarah felt a shift within herself, a development propelled by the fires of collaboration and confrontation. She was no longer a solo voice but had positioned herself as a catalyst for diverse ideas. But just as her confidence surged, she recognized the formidable barrier looming before her: how to handle dissent, especially the voices entwined with long-standing narratives that opposed her own. Sarah couldn't shake the unease, wondering if the very act of prioritizing collective voices would leave her vulnerable to drowning out her own. In that charged atmosphere of deliberation and exploration, she knew she was stepping into a deeper level of discourse, one fraught with risks that could either transform her or tear down the scaffolding of her ambitions. The stakes were rising, and the time had come to confront not just external biases, but the internal conflict she had long avoided, the very essence of her existence within this narrative. What secrets lay buried within her own confrontations with her lineage? As the discussions continued fervently around her, something within Sarah surged. The moment of truth approached, she could feel it palpably in her veins. How would she navigate this newfound complexity? The clamor of voices faded into a dull thrum as Sarah lost herself in thought, focusing on the implications of what lay ahead. The participants were eager, yet shadows of doubt spooled through her mind, threatening to tether her to the nervousness she fought to dispel. Yes, collaboration and discovery might invigorate the project, yet the thought of pushing against established narratives twisted her stomach in knots. Would she be a steward of change or an interloper in the sacred ground of historical discourse? In the midst of the debate, one voice rose above the others: the elder scholar, revered for her decades of insightful contributions. What if, instead of leading with our interpretations, we first listen? Discover the unheard voices before we weave them into new narratives. A collective nod spread through the group, but Sarah's pulse quickened. Listening was a fundamental principle, yet the very act felt disempowering to her. Listening is essential, Sarah agreed slowly, her own voice quivering against the tide of others. But it's also important to understand that we are not passive in this process. We have a responsibility to navigate these stories, to clarify our intentions while amplifying what we hear. If we remain silent, we risk allowing history to repeat itself. She felt a few uneasy eyes upon her, but pushed back against the instinct to shrink. This wasn't mere academic posturing, it cut deeper. The haunting thought that she might allow others' narratives to overshadow her voice drove her to assert further. Perhaps we can intertwine listening with an active exploration of the victims' stories, she proposed. We become conduits rather than authors, respected voices shaping rather than obscuring. The junior scholar interrupted, skepticism still nestled firmly within her. But being a conduit implies a certain level of control and authority over those narratives, doesn't it? How can we maintain true integrity? Frustration bubbled within Sarah. True integrity means recognizing our power while working beyond its confines. I am aware of my position, yet that does not preclude me from fully engaging with difficult histories. We are not here to erase but to illuminate. With those words, Sarah felt something shift internally. It was no longer just about her vision, it was about defining her role in relation to others, drawing strength from her willingness to navigate the gray spaces of authority and voice. Each point of contention became a lesson, raw and humbling. As discussions continued, Sarah connected with others, forging new bonds amid conflicts. What she initially perceived as barriers were now luminous threads weaving a tapestry of collaborative scholarship. Each voice that rose, each dissent echoed within her, adding complexity to her own story, yet with this burgeoning sense of purpose came the weight of introspection. As the conversations draped her like a cloak, she recognized that revealing the hidden victim stories would demand her to confront her own pain, her own history. The risk widened into an unsettling chasm. Could she present her familial narratives with the same integrity she demanded of her teammates? Images raced through her mind, shadows of conflict mingling with old hurts and memories. Strains of her lineage, people who battled against oppression, bloodlines burdened and reformed, their echoes implored her to carry their truths forward without diluting their impact. Why this matters to me, she began, her voice steadying as she spoke more to herself than the gathered assembly, is not only about these historical figures, it is about our own legacies and the choices we make when confronted with the past. I fear that in seeking to understand their stories, I might have to confront my own. A hush fell over the group, and in this moment, vulnerability unfolded as a unifying force. The challenge ahead began to crystallize. Sarah understood that this journey into history would become a mirror reflecting her own struggle with identity and complicity. Are we ready for this? She posed, glancing around, gauging reactions. The silence stretched long enough for tension to simmer, but also file into a collective resolve. The elders' thoughts weighed heavily upon her. Would they recognize her commitment? Was it enough to lead alongside them? A gentle yet persistent nagging pulled at her, there was still a distance between her internal conscience and the gathered scholars. It was an uncomfortable reminder of a battle she wasn't just fighting externally but internally. As Sarah stared into the faces of the assembled group, each laden with expectation and challenge, the truth echoed in the recesses of her mind. What did she have to lose? The stakes loomed larger than she ever anticipated, and the realization closed over her like a wave. Here was the precipice upon which her academic career balanced, teetering between what she hoped to represent and the haunting confrontations she could no longer escape. The conversation shifted in intensity, casting new shadows and alliances among the scholars, but Sarah remained fixed in her decision. The process of understanding others would mean revealing oneself, grappling with both external narratives and her inner tumult. Steeling her nerves, she knew she had stepped into a new chapter of her growth. The deeper her plunge into this collaborative, historical endeavor, the more she sensed that hidden within it was an unexpected transformation waiting for her to uncover. What choice would she make when faced with her past? And would she have the courage to forge ahead, even if it meant challenging her own fears? The answers felt tantalizingly close and yet shrouded in uncertainty. The echo of her thoughts resonated in the silence that followed her bold words, as though she had set off an internal earthquake within the group. Sarah felt the urgent need to ground herself amid the rising tide of uncertainty. She was acutely aware of the stakes involved, not just academically, but personally. This endeavor promised to peel back layers she had spent years meticulously crafting around her identity. As the discussions resumed, her focus sharpened. The collaborative spirit invigorated her, but the specter of her own buried history loomed larger. Each scholarly contribution was, in essence, a fleeting distraction from the intensity of her internal musings. Reminded of her own reluctance to confront the tangled narratives of her family, she began to feel an unsettled churn, a potent mix of unease and determination. With renewed clarity, Sarah lifted her gaze to the elder scholar who had initially urged the group to listen. Could we apply the same attention to our own stories? She inquired, a quiver underlying her words. In listening to the past, are we prepared to explore our biases and the shadows of our own experiences? The responses were mixed, some eyes widening in curiosity while others narrowed in skepticism. It was unorthodox to invite such personal reflection into an academic space. Yet ensconced in her resolve, Sarah articulated her belief: our histories are as relevant as those we study. If we cannot interrogate our own narratives, how can we authentically engage with the stories of others? The room held an electric tension, each scholar processing her challenge. Voices began to emerge, hesitantly at first, testing the waters of vulnerability she had dredged up. By drawing on her personal history, she had breached the noticeable divide between theory and lived experience. Stories emerged, tales of struggle, loss, and triumph that resonated with the themes of their collaborative research. Each voice not only revealed the scars but illuminated the resilience required to navigate their complex histories. This was no longer just an academic conversation, it had transformed into a shared catharsis. Yet amidst the flourishing dialogue, Sarah grappled with the gnawing thought: how would she confront her own past? Choosing to view her family's history as an asset rather than a liability was difficult. She recalled her grandmother's tales, stories filled with pain but tinged with resilience. Sarah's lips pressed tight as she digested the implications. Expressing these realities meant delving into the murky waters of guilt and responsibility. Time bled away as discussions swelled and receded, but Sarah felt herself increasingly anchored in the unfolding narrative. She questioned if this was the moment to reveal the deeply personal layers she had cloaked in silence for so long. Every time she nearly divulged her truths, fear throbbed within her, a fear of exposure, of judgment, of not being enough. "Sarah, your insights are invaluable," one peer interjected, pulling her back from her spiraling thoughts. "You have a unique perspective that could elevate our understanding. Are you not willing to share it?" The sincerity in their gaze pierced her defenses. Here lay an opportunity, a chance to bridge her legacy with her academic journey. Yet the prospect of revealing her history was terrifying. Wrestling with her identity had become an arduous process over years. Inaction felt safer, yet deeply unfulfilling. "Perhaps it's time to redefine what strength means," she murmured, almost to herself. To understand that vulnerability is an inherent aspect of authenticity. The words settled heavily in the air, palpable in their weight. Could she embody her beliefs and allow her own truth to surface? With each beat of her heart, Sarah pondered the possibility of stepping into this authenticity. Moments passed, heartbeats amplified in her ears, and then she made her choice. She would not allow fear to determine her path. As the group delved deeper, she felt the fissures of her own restraints begin to crack. The collective exploration of narratives would be enriched by her willingness to engage with her own. But a new feeling began to creep in, a suffocating breath of doubt. Would her revelations shift their perceptions of her, or would they create a new connection altogether? The weight of confronting her truth loomed, and she realized her next step was looming closer than she ever anticipated. A confrontation with her past awaited, one that could define not only this project but her very essence as a scholar. Steeling herself, she thought, the moment was drawing near. Would she embrace this opportunity for growth, and could she navigate the storm of personal revelations that lay ahead? The journey into her own history threatened to unveil complexities she had long shielded from the light. With the echoes of her past beckoning, Sarah prepared for a confrontation that promised to be as transformative as the stories she sought to tell. What awaited her on the other side of this immersion into her own life? Would she emerge bearing the scars of her truth, or would she find healing in the act of sharing? A familiar tension settled within Sarah's chest as she approached the pivotal moment she had so long deferred. The energy in the room buzzed with shared narratives, yet she felt paradoxically isolated in her own turmoil. The laughter and camaraderie of her peers faded into a dull roar, overshadowed by the weight of her silence. As they continued exchanging stories, she knew she was at a crossroads, one that demanded truth from her and threatened to unravel her tightly held facade. That in her mind, the conversations echoed back to her a series of questions demanding resolution. Who was she, really? The confident scholar, or a woman haunted by the fragmented memories of her lineage? Each story shared by her colleagues reinforced her resolve to speak, yet the uncertainty of how her truth would be received gnawed at her resolve. What if they misunderstood? What if they turned away? As the group opened the floor for further discussion, Sarah felt the walls of her carefully constructed world begin to tremble. She had started this journey with an intention to challenge her peers to connect their experiences with their academic pursuits. Now, she found herself on the brink of that challenge herself. The irony was not lost on her. To push others towards vulnerability while remaining ensconced in her shell felt disingenuous. "I can't let fear take the lead," she murmured under her breath, drawing in a deep breath. "This is my moment." With each passing thought, she prepared herself, rehearsing subtly in her mind the narrative of her family's pain and triumph. Memories brushed against her consciousness like shadows: her grandmother's struggles, the resilience that clashed with despair, the silence that lingered in her home like an unwelcome guest. Confronting these stories felt like peeling back layers, revealing scars she had long masked under layers of academic achievement and professional polish. "Sarah, do you have something to add?" Another voice called out, breaking into her introspection. The circle of expectant faces turned towards her, and suddenly, the moment seemed impossibly grand, a daunting stage upon which she stood alone. Swallowing hard, Sarah nodded, sensing the urgency to seize this opportunity. "I do," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I've been thinking a lot about how our history shapes our narratives. But, in order to explore others, we must first confront our own." With each unfolding sentence, she plunged into her family's past, the choices her grandmother made, the burdens carried, the legacies inherited. As she spoke, the room fell into a hush, and she saw the flicker of understanding dawn in her peers' eyes. This wasn't just an academic exercise, this was real. Her words pierced through the air, revealing not only her own scars but inviting them to consider their own as well. The deeper she delved, the more she shed the trepidation that had held her captive. Sharing her truth became a cathartic act, deepening her understanding of herself in relation to the journey of others. No longer just an observer of narratives, she became an active participant, reshaping her role within the collective experience. When she finally finished, silence enveloped the room, heavy and reverberating. For a moment, the air was charged with unspoken acknowledgments. "Thank you for sharing that," one colleague finally broke the stillness, their voice soft yet firm. "Your story resonates. It adds a weight to what we're doing here that we may have overlooked." Recognition glimmered in their responses, as stories of struggle and mental resilience emerged from unexpected corners of the room. This was not merely a surface-level discussion anymore, it was a transformative moment that had woven their paths together in an unexpected tapestry of empathy and understanding. Yet, amidst the newfound connection, the echoes of her family's legacy still rattled in her mind, a reminder that vulnerability would only lead to deeper exploration. Had she fully accepted this truth? The horizon of her understanding felt at once expansive and limiting, steeped in the tension of what more she could discover within herself. As the discussion floor opened up for questions, Sarah felt both exhilaration and trepidation. What further burdens would she be forced to confront in the light of her revelations? Inviting deeper analysis meant facing not just her personal story but the impact it would have on her identity as a scholar. In the pulsating quiet of the moment, she began to realize that the journey had only just begun. With her heart racing and the weight of expectation looming, Sarah earned herself a pivotal question: what ramifications awaited her as she ventured deeper into her own psyche? Would she emerge empowered, or would the weight of unresolved family histories pull her under? The energy in the room shifted after Sarah's raw disclosure, like the unmistakable tension that precedes a thunderstorm. As colleagues processed her personal revelations, she felt a heaviness transform into an electric charge. It simultaneously excited and unsettled her. What had begun as an internal reckoning had made its way into the open, a declaration that echoed beyond her initial intentions. Contradictory feelings whirled within her, a fierce determination to further explore this newfound authenticity crossed paths with the familiar twinges of self-doubt. What lay ahead? Did delving deeper into her family's narrative offer clarity or merely a path to more questions? Eyebrows furrowed and faces turned contemplatively inward. She could sense the tides shifting. Her vulnerability had inspired courage among her peers, but what implications did that hold for her own journey? So, a voice cut through the buzzing thoughts: how do we ensure that the narratives we're exploring don't just scratch the surface? It was Mark, a colleague known for his analytical questions. The honesty of his inquiry encouraged the group to lean in, their curiosity piqued. Her mind raced, connecting threads of her family's history with their discussion about academic rigor. Narratives aren't just stories, they're constructs that need to be challenged. We need to engage with them in a way that exposes raw truths and complexities. Just like my grandmother's legacy, there was both pain and resilience entwined in her choices, and it's that very tension that can lead us to real understanding. Sarah's confident tone filled the room, but her heart pounded at the vulnerability she demonstrated. The metaphorical layers she had stripped away revealed more than just her struggles. They sparked an internal dialogue around personal accountability and responsibility. Was she truly ready to bear the emotional weight that came with connecting her narrative to the broader academic and professional realm? Unsure if she could navigate the ensuing expectations, Sarah took a moment to breathe. This reaction from her peers could launch her into new opportunities, or perhaps it could force a reckoning with aspects of herself she was not yet ready to confront. The balance hung achingly in the air, creating a pressure against her chest. "I need to know more," she admitted, her voice taking on an urgent undertone. "We can't shy away from examining our discomfort if we're to transform our understanding. This means embracing the vulnerabilities that shaped us, mine, yours, everyone's. What do our stories reveal?" Postures shifted around her, pens were poised to take notes, yet it was clear that Sarah was not just offering academic insights. She was laying the groundwork for an honest inquiry into identity and resilience. Every answer contained the potential for a deeper question. Was she not only uncovering her own narrative, but also daring her colleagues to confront theirs? As the discussion spiraled into a cascade of personal stories, Sarah felt a strange sensation wash over her, an unsettling blend of empowerment and trepidation. With every shared experience, she realized that her own pain was not an isolated case. The weight of their collective histories beckoned her to delve further into her understanding of self, but each passage opened new vulnerabilities she hadn't yet embraced. With every question posed and every story shared, Sarah recognized a nascent strength burgeoning within her. Now, the inquiry wasn't just about academia, it was about personal integrity, about weaving her thread into a larger tapestry of shared human experience. Glancing at her colleagues, she saw empathic smiles, nods of encouragement, and curiosity gleaming in their eyes. Yet, as invigorating as that was, it raised a chilling thought. What if this journey to self-discovery stripped away layers she was not prepared to lose? What if in exposing the depths of her emotional landscape, she opened untouched wounds? The potent atmosphere surged again as Mark initiated a discussion about how personal narratives could redefine their professional methodologies, propelling Sarah into reflection. Was she prepared to take a stance that could alter not only her views but also her career trajectory? Sarah closed her eyes for a brief moment, picturing her grandmother, her struggles, and the myriad of stories hidden in the recesses of her mind. The storm of both fear and exhilaration raged. Here lay the undeniable truth: each revelation would be an anchor or a weight. Strapping herself in for this journey, she whispered to herself silently, embracing the electric pulse that coursed through her veins as the floor opened for more questions. The moment crystallized into clarity. She was not just uncovering her past, she was preparing to face her future, and as the conversation deepened, she couldn't shake the gnawing apprehension that shadows lurked ahead, waiting to be confronted. What were the truths waiting to be unearthed from her family's legacy? Would she find liberation, or would the revelations trap her in the very history she sought to transcend? The conversation around her swirled as Mark's inquiries ignited new threads of discussion, each one pulling at the corners of Sarah's mind like loose strings on a well-worn tapestry. She was both participant and observer in this delicate dance of vulnerability, and as more colleagues began sharing their personal narratives, she felt an expectant pressure to elevate her own. How could she contribute meaningfully to this burgeoning exploration? The stakes felt high where once she had exhibited apprehension, now she recognized the power of authenticity. Each story cast a light upon her internal struggles, illuminating hidden depths of her courage. Did she possess the strength to deepen this discourse? Could she step into the abyss of her fears and confront them head-on? As stories flowed, she found herself faced with the precipice of her unresolved issues. Balancing on the edge of her own narrative, she sensed the walls around her beginning to crumble, exposing foundations she had built up over the years. The fear of losing herself in this process transformed moment by moment. Was it a threat or an opportunity for growth? In a sudden moment of sincerity, a colleague, Jenna, recounted a heart-wrenching incident about her father's struggle against addiction. The room filled with a palpable sense of empathy, but more importantly, it struck a chord with Sarah. The resonance of shared vulnerability urged her to speak up. "We often sail in circles, don't we?" she began, her voice steadier than she had anticipated. "It's as if we're afraid to anchor ourselves in the depths because of the fear of what we'll find. But what if that truth is actually the key to understanding ourselves?" There it was, the execution of her internal contemplation manifested into a call for engagement. This was the crossroads she had sought. By addressing the discomfort head-on, she could challenge not only her own fears but also inspire her colleagues. With this new clarity, the memories of her grandmother's struggles flickered in her mind, a guiding lantern illuminating the way forward. The room seemed to lean into her words, and Sarah recognized how her vulnerability had transformed a chain reaction, igniting earnestness in her peers that fanned the flames of collective reflection. Yet, underneath this growing strength was a raw panic. If her insights drove new shifts in their methodologies, what would that say about her trajectory? What if she failed to live up to the expectations created by her own revelations? Feeling the ground beneath her shift, Sarah took a breath, summoning courage in the face of the unknown. She did not need to have all the answers, her role was simply to initiate a conversation. Each word she spoke held the potential for change, both for herself and for her colleagues. This realization embedded itself in her mind, and with it came a surge of determination. Suddenly, loudly, her phone rang, a startling disruption to the intimate atmosphere they had created. A text message flashed: "You need to come home. It's urgent." Just as quickly as her momentum had built, it faltered. What could be so urgent? Pandemonium erupted in her thoughts. The weight of familial duty suddenly pressed against her, threatening to swallow the promise of potential she had begun to mold with her colleagues. The curiosity that had propelled her through this enlightening session twisted into an intoxicating confusion. "Sarah, you okay?" Mark's voice grounded her, snapping her back to the moment. But nothing felt solid anymore. She had opened a door she could not close, and at that moment, her future was teetering on a precipice, uniquely entwined with her past. Could she brave whatever awaited her at home and simultaneously continue to pursue this journey of self-discovery? Recognition dawned within her, decisions loomed that could either solidify her newfound identity or shatter the fragile confidence she nurtured. As she glanced at her colleagues, mixing doubt with unyielding resolve, a decision began to form in her mind. Whatever awaited her on the other side of that text, she would face it. But first, she needed to gather her thoughts and lay down the groundwork to navigate this unexpected tribulation. The moment of truth was upon her. She hadn't just unwrapped her narrative, she had opened a floodgate. Now, with every choice, it was clear she was standing on the precipice of transformation, both personally and professionally, fueled by questions begging answers. What truths awaited her at home, and how would these revelations shape the narrative she was so fervently constructing? The amalgamation of her fears and aspirations coalesced into an irresistible drive to confront whatever lay ahead, the tension surging again like a storm ready to break. As Sarah sat in her car, her hands gripping the steering wheel, she felt as if she were caught between two worlds. The urgency of the text weighed heavily on her mind, but the echoes of her colleagues' discussions resonated deep within her. Each story shared had illuminated facets of her own life that she had pushed aside for too long. Leaving that potential behind was no longer an option. Pulling onto the familiar street that led to her childhood home, memories rushed back like tides, each one tugging at her heartstrings. Her grandmother's resilience, the whispered tales of struggle and survival, had forged her identity. Confronting the legacy of her lineage wouldn't just be an exercise in academic inquiry, it was personal. The truth lay buried just below the surface of her own history, ready to be uncovered, blurring the lines between guilt and understanding. As she parked outside her house, Sarah took a moment to breathe deeply, centering herself. This was the moment for reckoning not only with her family's past but with her own fears. Having shared a glimpse of her struggles with her colleagues, she felt the weight of their support propelling her forward. She could no longer remain a passive vessel on the river of history. It was time to navigate the waters of her identity. Opening the door, the scent of home wafted through the air, warm and familiar, yet tinged with tension. Her family had gathered in the living room, their expressions a reflection of concern and expectation. As she entered, her mother looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, emotions bubbling just beneath the surface. "Sarah, we need to talk," her mother said, her voice trembling slightly as she motioned for her to sit. The gravity of the moment felt palpable. "What has happened?" Sarah's heart raced, and she braced for the worst. "It's your grandfather," her mother whispered, overwhelmed. "He's been admitted to the hospital. It's serious." The world around Sarah dimmed as her mother's words sank in. Flashes of her grandfather, sitting in his old armchair exchanging stories of battles fought and won against the currents of life, filled her mind. She had barely acknowledged the shadows of his past, but in that moment, she realized she was getting a chance to confront them. It was time to dive deeper into the narratives that had shaped not only her family history but her very essence. "Can we go see him?" she asked, her voice firm now, empowering herself to step into this moment. Her mother nodded, grateful for her strength. At the hospital, as they moved through the sterile corridors, Sarah's heart raced not just with worry but with clarity about the necessary reconciliation that awaited her. Inside the hospital room, the familiar figure lay frail and fragile. Momentarily taken aback, she stepped closer, absorbing the profound legacy resting before her. "Grandpa?" she whispered, her voice shaking as she held his hand. "Can you hear me?" Opening his eyes ever so slightly, he offered a small smile, recognition mingling with the weariness of the fight he had ahead. As they sat together, the conversation flowed naturally. Old stories emerged, tales from a time when his decisions had shaped the future of their family. It was time for her to ask the questions she had buried alongside their history. "Grandpa," she began, her voice steady, "I found something about our past. About the struggles you endured and your decisions during those times." He nodded, encouraging her to continue. "I guess what I want to know is how you made peace with those choices. How did you find strength in adversity?" Her questions hung in the air, a bridge between generations, inviting vulnerability as it lay open for exploration. With a deep breath, he opened up, revealing the weight of his burdens, the heart-wrenching decisions, the moments of doubt, and ultimately, the evolution of resilience that shaped his character. Sarah listened intently, unearthing complexities that had previously remained hidden in the shadows. In turn, she found a new strength within herself, a realization that every struggle shaped them both. After their conversation, Sarah left the hospital feeling burdened yet liberated. A symbol of understanding had unfolded. This transformative experience had reminded her that the journey of self-discovery didn't require forsaking where she came from, it meant embracing it wholeheartedly. Blemishes and all that. In the weeks that followed, Sarah poured her energy into her project, now suffused with personal insight derived from her time with her grandfather. Her research trajectory evolved to intertwine her familial narrative with the greater stories of Genghis Khan's victims. By sharing her newfound understanding, she transformed guilt into a narrative of healing. Her lineage became not a barrier but a pathway. At the next conference, when she presented her findings, she spoke from a place of authenticity, unveiling the complex interplay of oppression, resilience, and evolution that reverberated through her family history. The audience listened, captivated by her blend of history and personal revelation, their feedback rich with engagement and emotional resonance. By fully stepping into her truth, Sarah achieved professional recognition while simultaneously reconciling personal burdens. The applause at the end signified not just acceptance, but a shared understanding that history is an interwoven tapestry of experiences, each narrative contributing to a richer collective understanding. Now, she stood not just as a scholar but as an advocate for those silenced by time, empowered by her own heritage. Her journey into darkness became illumination, finally allowing her to weave together the intricate threads of identity, healing, and understanding. In that moment, Sarah realized she had not only discovered her voice, she had achieved an authentic transformation, one that linked the past with the present and forged a clearer path towards a purposeful future. This was just the beginning, but she felt ready. Her heart was open, her resolve unwavering, and she knew that here, amidst the stories yet to unfold, lay the power to change lives, hers included. Now, it's your turn. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.